In my America, everyone gets free Twinkies with their healthcare. It's not very good for my waistline, but it will be very good for the Twinkie industry. In my first day in office, I will outlaw every super PAC except for the Twinkie super PAC.
Have you ever wanted to get your campaign off the ground?
You know, I've thought about it, and like I really have wanted to, and I realized there's two major restrictions in the way. I mean, I wasn't born here, so that's one, which kind of sucks. Can't really do much with that. Actually, you can. I can be everything but president, which is pretty cool. Like, who would want to be president anyway? But also,
what?
No, let's be honest. Who would want to be president? You want to be president?
Are you serious?
I'll be president. That'll probably surprise you.
Dude, every 5-year-old in America wants to be president.
That's true, because when you're 5, you don't realize all the stuff that comes with it. And my dog just walked away. You think if I rustle the chips, she'll come back?
Yeah, rustle the chips. You're right.
Oh, there she goes again.
Are you ready for your close-up?
So you were saying the presidents, why whatever consider having a campaign.
Every 5-year-old in America wants to be president.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. And then like you realize you've got to turn 20, and then you read about all this stuff about like what does it take to have a campaign in the United States, and you're like, I really don't want to have a campaign anymore. At least if you're someone like me.
Man, you just broke every 5-year-old's hearts out there.
I know.
Half of you have X'd out by this point.
You're assuming there was like a half to begin with. I guess that doesn't really make sense either.
There's always a half. Like, well, maybe if it's one person, then half of that person. That'd be kind of difficult.
See this?
Yeah.
This is the dead horse, and this is you. This is you right now. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Man,
yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah, that actually really hurt.
I bet.
It hurt almost as much as my wallets now that I'm financing my own campaign.
Really? How are you financing? You're financing your own campaign?
I'm financing my own campaign. You know why? Because I'm not one of those dirty political sleaze bags up on the hill doing all this shady business.
Wait. How did you get so... Are you like getting a cut of this podcast revenue that I don't know about?
There's all sorts of things you don't know about, and we're going to keep it that way. Here's what I will say. There's a lot of reasons. Why I'm doing it this way. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about why I'm financing my own campaigns.
Yeah. Why are you running a campaign in the first place?
That's a good point, because I know I said I didn't want to do it, but there's look, now I contain multitudes. I'm full of contradictions, and that's okay, because not only do I want to listen.
You're turning into another one of America's most beloved politicians.
America political again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dramatic pause.
I'm moved.
Put it back on the table. I want to talk about politics. Mom, Dad, I just want to do it. I'm sick and tired of having no idea how any of this stuff works.
Yeah, me too. Me too, man. I'm with you there.
Well, here's what I will say. Okay. We'll get into it.
Yeah.
I just need to take a breather. If you were to hypothetically get your campaign started, what's the first thing you would do?
You know, the first thing that I would do is I would reach out to people, because I want a team, you know. I want to build a solid team that's going to have my back.
Coalition, buzzword right there. You want a coalition.
A coalition?
A coalition.
What's a coalition?
You know, like everyone's throwing that word around, you know, like
I don't know what a coalition is.
It's like a strong network of people that you want around you, the right people to create the platform that you want, you know, like people that can reach out for things like technology and marketing, fundraising, you know, stuff like that. Like,
so a coalition is going to help me build my campaign? Basically,
it's going to help you develop some support, and that's the number one thing. Like when you're getting a campaign started, say you're a nobody, you know, a no-name person, for example, a social studies teacher, no connections in the political sphere, but you just really want to get into politics. I bring this up because this actually happened. There was this social studies teacher, his name was something Bowman, but
Jamal Bowman.
Jamal Bowman.
Not something Bowman.
Oh, so you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mad respect for this social studies teacher. But, well, why don't you tell the story? You seem pretty passionate about it.
Okay. So Jamal Bowman, he was a social studies teacher, and nobody really knew about him until a couple months ago when he started running for Congress. And he was previously involved in a lot of activist groups and stuff like that. But then when he finally decided he was going to launch his campaign, he got an endorsement from Justice Democrats. And after he got that endorsement, he kind of like built a very strong team, and he went on to beat Elliot Engel, who kind of ruled that district before he came in.
And that was like a political insider that he beat.
Yeah.
So that's pretty wild, right? Like, so this guy has like no political experience, but he's got friends
Yeah.
because he was active politically before.
Mhm.
So he's like, he's talked to people and he knows who to talk to. And bring it back to that word, he formed the right types of coalitions.
Yeah.
And that's I guess the most important part of starting your campaign as a nobody, right?
Exactly.
There was this other story of this guy, Madison Cawthorn. Sure, you heard of him, right?
Definitely.
So he's like 25 years old,
Yeah.
no political experience, but he wanted to get into that world.
Oh yeah.
And I think this was in a district in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
but he ran as on the Republican ticket and actually ended up beating Trump's pick for that district
Yeah.
in a primary vote.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive, right? So the president endorsed the other guy,
Mhm.
and Madison Cawthorn, this 25-year-old dude, no experience, comes in out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And how does he win? He does it by forming local coalitions, local politics, reaching out to the right people, like school teachers, residents in the community, and like, I guess, like promoting the collective voice of like real people on like a really grassroots local level was his strategy. And that's how he's going to do it. Maybe he'll win the general too. Who knows?
Yeah, his story is like mind-blowing, because if he does end up winning, he's going to become the youngest guy to be a congressman. He's only like
Probably
what,
ever,
like
right?
25
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something like that.
Yeah.
So his story is insane. But then another insane story is Lauren Boebert, I believe is how it's
Yeah, that sounds
pronounced,
right.
maybe?
Yeah.
And so she also had an upset kind of in her district, where she kind of came out of nowhere and she just started running, and she used these similar tactics that we've been talking about, that Bowman used and that Madison used, and she was able to use these tactics and kind of launch her own campaign and have success in the similar way. She came into the public spotlight when she first confronted former U.S. Representative Beto O'Rourke.
A lot of political clout.
Mhm.
And for like this Boebert girl
Mhm.
to like, so what she did is like challenge him openly at events, and this was like highly publicized, and she would hold these rallies and really engage with people in a very direct way. So that was, again, like really forming coalitions and strong groups of people that can get behind you from like very direct contact. That's like the moral of the story, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And you need to be really savvy in terms of how you budget, because you're going to be, if you're trying to do an upset like this, you're going to have a limited budget that you're working with, because most of your fundraising is going to come from grassroots people.
Yeah.
And so you want to be very cautious about where you allocate your money. You also want to be very savvy towards how you market, what events you plan. Make sure you're very efficient with the usage of your money. But also, you want to play very strategically, in the sense that you really only need more votes than your competitor, right? You don't need to like aim to like get everybody. But
Yeah.
I mean, in essence, you'd want to get as many people as you can, because you want to adequately represent them. But in reality, it's like voter turnout is very difficult. So
You got to be strategic with it,
you
right?
have to be very strategic.
Yeah. You got to like look at like not just who are my constituents and like how will I represent the interests of everyone in this district, which as a legislator should be your main motivation, but also like who's going to come out to vote?
Yeah.
Who are going to be the people that I actually have to I guess appeal to is the right way to phrase it. And I think you said it in like a pretty accurate way, that you just have to get more votes than the other guy. And what does that look like? Well, first you look at what the turnout numbers were for like the past several elections, because different regions are going to be have a different amount of political involvement. That's just the way it goes. So you look at the turnout numbers for the last few years. You look at the demographics of like not only how many people are coming out, but who are these people, and who are the people that have voted for candidates similar to me in the past, and how can I reach them? Or if these demographics are changing, how can I switch up my message a little bit to capture that change and vote? And so these are all really strategic things that campaign managers and candidates do all the time, and it's critical for an election. You know, it's not just can I get my message across, but can I get it across to the right people? You know.
Oh yeah, and it's also, you know, like much of campaigning is really like it's kind of like a show you put on, because even like, you know, when Obama was in office, I'd often hear him say, you know, like, we're not campaigning anymore. Like, he'd talk to like his political rivals or stuff like that. Or if he was in a meeting with John McCain, he'd just flat out be like, we're not campaigning anymore. The campaign's over.
Right.
And so what is like a lot of campaigning is really like a showmanship to kind of not only like get your facts across, but it's more of just like letting people know what you're about. And then once you actually are able to use that campaigning strategy to get into office, then you can actually start implementing those things.
It's like, let's get down to business, you know, like show's over, guys. Let's go home and do the real work.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Like, I do remember him very directly saying, like, folks, like, campaign's over. We don't gotta talk like this, and we can just move forward. You know, and it can go as far as something like, Hillary and Obama had, or Mrs. Clinton, I should say, and Obama had a very intense campaign in 2008. All sorts of attack ads against each other and stuff like that. And certainly it's not comparable to like how vile politics have gotten in 2020, but it was still pretty adversarial, right? But immediately after the campaign was over, they just stopped bad-mouthing each other. They're friends again. And what do you know? Obama offers Hillary a very important spot, Secretary of State. And, you know, the rest is history. But that just kind of gives you an idea of the way these political games work. It's a lot for show, and it's a lot for moving the campaign along. You know, like people love a good plot, a really thick, rich plot with lots of twists and turns. And if you don't hype things up and put on this show, you know, put on this like competitive mask, then your campaign just will not be as strong. So that is something that they do.
And, you know, like one of the biggest masks that exists in campaigning are PACs, you know, like, especially for campaign financing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, maybe like there's PAC interest everywhere.
Well, what is a PAC? Why don't you break that down for us first?
True. Yeah, I should definitely do that. So in the United States, a political action committee is a 527 organization, which basically means that it's an organization that one creates in order to pool funds to contribute to campaign financing. And so there's different kinds of PACs. There's like your regular standard PAC, and then there's your super PAC. And I think the main difference between the two is that in a super PAC, you can contribute unlimited amounts, but in a PAC, I think there's like a limit.
Yeah, it's super regulated. And so PACs have been around for a while. The Political Action Committee, that idea has been around for a really long time, since like as early as the 1940s. And the idea is just that as an entity, as an individual, or like a group of individuals, you should be able to support candidates in a way that you choose, whether it's monetarily or through commercials, stuff like that. And so there's caps on how much money you can generate for a campaign. Those caps are set at around $5,000 per individual, and I think $15,000 if someone is interested in donating to a whole party. The super PACs are the interesting ones and highly controversial. There's all sorts of stuff that we can get into about those, but basically what super PACs are about is that in 2010 there was this landmark Supreme Court case. What is it? Citizens United versus why am I blanking on this? Citizens United versus FEC, maybe,
Federal Elections Committee?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. But anyway, there's this conservative think tank group called Citizens United, and what happened is that they wanted to run some anti-Hillary ads shortly before the primary, and I like the current legislation says that you can't run any type of you can't do anything that affects an election within 30 days of that federal election. So obviously, if you're running like smear commercials before the election within 30 days, that counts as violating that law. So they sued, they went to court, and the Supreme Court made the decision that no, that's a violation of your First Amendment rights. That saying that a corporation or a group isn't able to run that type of commercial would be like an imposition on the First Amendment. So that was important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it created this idea that corporations are also folks. They're also people, right? Because when you think about like protecting people's First Amendment rights, you think about the right to express an individual's or like a collective's opinion, free speech. You don't think about something like a corporation's ability to finance an election or commercials. So there's this very strange conflation and highly controversial conflation between people and corporations, number one. And number two, it basically, that's what opened the door for SuperPACs. A SuperPAC is a PAC that has an unlimited amount of money that they can help finance other candidates' elections for. So a lot of controversy.
Yeah, and ultimately, SuperPACs are like, so I guess to start off with, the Federal Elections Committee or Commission, what it does is it bars corporations from being able to fund campaigns directly.
Directly, yeah.
So super PACs are just like this thing that was created for corporations to be able to funnel their money through.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I don't really understand why you would bar a corporation and then just tell them, okay, you can't contribute, but you can form a super PAC and contribute. Like, well, what is even going on there?
It's really weird. I guess we should be a little more clear about how this works. It could be a little confusing. So what'll happen is that corporations obviously have a lot of vested interests. Corporations kind of control everything that's happening in society indirectly through politicians. So, for example, like a company like Coke or Pepsi will have their own interests and they want certain legislation to be passed. And how do they go about doing this in a legal way? And that's super PACs. So they can't just write a check for a politician. That's illegal. And that would constitute directly financing a campaign. But what they can do is join or form a super PAC and then funnel money into that. And that super PAC will independently, in air quotes, campaign on behalf of the candidate. So, for example, a lot of these commercials that you see on TV or online, they're not actually sponsored by the candidate. They're created by super PACs. And, I mean, that's advertising. That's campaigning. I don't know how that can be argued as like indirect support, but these super PACs will create these commercials independently, again in quotes, of the candidates, and will campaign on their behalf.
Yeah, and I was reading this analysis from the Washington Post, and it says nearly half of all super PAC money comes from just 50 donors, and we're talking about large sums of money here, and so
like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Like the people who are funding the majority of these campaigns, they're like nowhere near like the average like U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
So you can definitely tell from that there's a lot of influence in these elections that isn't necessarily reflecting our interests, which is probably a major reason why oftentimes we'll feel so disconnected from the politicians who are representing us, because in order to get to the place where they've gotten, they've had to like mingle with all these people who are going to give them the finances.
Right.
And so, ultimately when it comes down to it, it's just like it's the campaign finance law that a lot of the times kind of just messes with us.
Just because it's like talked about, but nothing really is done about it. And like, it's not, there was literally a Supreme Court case that we just talked about that makes this stuff legal. And it's so entrenched in our political system that people talk a lot about, for example, like identity politics might take up like 80% of like social media fervor about like political action, which is important, but stuff like this where a very small number of very rich and powerful people can indirectly control the political livelihood of all of Capitol Hill, that's really what we should be paying most of our attention to. That's what's affecting us on a daily basis. This is a little bit tangential, but all this stuff like identity politics and stuff, it's almost like a distractor from these really real ways that our lives and livelihoods are completely governed by the interest of a few very rich and wealthy people through a legal system. Once again, like the Supreme Court approved this system. And just to put it into perspective, I like that quote, that analysis from WAPO about how half of all campaign financing was done by 50 people, you said?
Yeah.
So for example, someone like Trump, his campaign has raised, I think, close to $50 million so far. That's so far. Like they're getting started. They're going to ramp that up. So 25 million of that 50 came from a small handful of people. So that should show you how much money these people can funnel into the candidates they choose. And this happens on both sides. Democrats, Republicans, and everyone in between uses super PACs to their advantage.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all heard of the Koch brothers,
Oh yeah, gotta love them.
Always in the news, always in the media. But there's so many, we only really hear mostly about the Koch brothers, but there's so many other organizations, corporations, and just like union influence as well. But ultimately what it comes down to is the campaign finance law that exists. So we're kind of in this cycle where continuously we're just depending on these sources to finance campaigns because that's the way that the legislation is set, and that's the way continuously these organizations and these corporations that do campaigns this way want them to function so that they can keep on having that influence. And it's kind of just in this dead end cycle where we try to get legislation passed to regulate campaign financing so that they don't have as much of a hand in these matters, but we just keep failing because of the money and the influence they already have. We're kind of having a very difficult time uprooting that system. Yeah,
because I mean, it's once again, it's just entrenched into the way that we view politics. And there's this other analysis I was looking at about alternative systems to the way that we currently have. This is kind of off script, I guess, but might as well mention it. So there's this. So like what we could do as an alternative to. Well, I guess before I talk about alternatives, I should talk about like we're criticizing the fact that we have super PACs a lot, but there's also some reasons why it might be considered a good thing. Number one being the argument that maybe corporations that operate at a very high level and are like highly influential in our daily lives, maybe they should have a say in the types of important legislation that might help them be better corporations and serve society better. And that's a really moralistic argument. I don't think I personally have faith in corporations to not abuse a law like that, but that could be one argument. The second argument is that, say we don't have PACs, say we have an alternative system where, for example, every individual is given a little bit of money, a voucher, and they can give that voucher to whoever they want, whichever political party they want. And that's the way political donations work. Well, you say, okay, like that might be a good idea, but then think about how easily coalitions can form and how easily one group can tell its entire constituency, oh, spend your voucher this way. For example, say you're part of like AARP, the insurance company or something like that, and AARP will tell you, okay, employees, I want you to use your voucher like this. That's in the company's interest. Well, that's kind of like a PAC too. That's kind of like a super PAC too. So there's all these issues with like all of the systems. So something's always going to come up. But I definitely think that the way it's currently set up, power is consolidated way too much in the hands of a few. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And, in recent news, we've all heard about the Russian hacking and Trump's claims that TikTok is apparently spying on us.
Yeah.
I don't know the validity of those claims about TikTok spying on us and whether TikTok needs to be banned or not. But it's definitely...
Well, that was actually super scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many of us have TikTok downloaded on our phones. TikTok's so much fun to use, honestly.
It's super fun. Okay, like I was ripping on it. Before I started using it, before I was scrolling on it for literally like an hour before bed, I would make fun of everybody because it started out as this really stupid thing called Musical.ly. I don't know if you like. This might be a little.
Are we getting into a history lesson of TikTok now? Like,
it's important.
What's going on?
It's going to be in the Supreme Court. I'm telling you.
Really?
Trump's tweeting about. I think so. I think there's a lot of really freaky political stuff going on with it right now. But anyway, it is kind of fun. Back to my main point. And I'll be sad to see it go. But like I said, like the amount of information that they collect is pretty scary. Like I think they can know the content of your messages and will advertise to you accordingly. That's a little scary, and that's all within the user policy agreement and stuff like that. In fact, it's so scary that that members of Congress and like any federal employee has been instructed to delete it off of all their kids' phones. And if the government is saying something like that, I'm a little freaked out. That's it. That's my 2 minutes on TikTok.
Wait, so how do we like look out to make sure, because so far it sounds like everyone other than the average U.S. citizen has control over who gets
exactly.
The Chinese through like TikTok, Russians through their Facebook hacking, corporations through SuperPACs. Like
exactly.
How do we look out for these things?
No, and I really liked how you found a way to tie my rant back into this. It's very relevant. That's the question, right? How do you feel empowered in a world designed to make you feel disempowered once you start looking into it? They give you an illusion of control, right? They tell you, okay, like you vote, your interests will be represented, democracy.
Ooh, now we're getting into those conspiracy theories.
Well, the more you look into it, the less it sounds like a conspiracy. But we won't get we're not gonna go into Alex Jones territory. All I'm saying,
that would be some fun territory to explore, though.
In the future, we'll see how these ratings go right now, and in the future, we'll go there. But all I'm saying, and the point that like this whole podcast, especially this episode, is trying to make, is that you oftentimes don't have the type of control you think you have. If you take the time to look into these things yourself and get an idea of the way that these systems were built and the way that they're set up, and then vote for people who actively want to dismantle them, or at least have a better idea, then that's like the best way forward in terms of making people feel empowered and kind of like ending this idea that democracy is a joke, because that's an idea that's thrown around a lot, and it's dangerous in some ways in that it makes people, especially young people, highly impressionable people like us, feel disillusioned with the country and the values that the country was built upon. And to me, that is scary, because I'm proud to be American. I love the principles that this country was founded upon in the Declaration of Independence, in the Constitution. And these are values and virtues I think we should strive towards, rather than feeling so disillusioned with the current system and just feeling like we have no choice but to throw it all away, like turn our back on America and American values. I think we should do the opposite. We should realize that what's happening is a deviation from American values. This is not what the founding fathers had in mind when they wrote all those documents, So for the sake of American democracy, it's imperative that we do diligence to the research it takes to know how can we elect people that are going to make sure that representation happens in all the ways that we talked about before.
Yeah, and another huge way that influence comes into play, other than the PACs that we've been talking about for so long, it's so similar, but it's called lobbying. And I'm sure you've heard of that term, right?
Yeah. And like they're almost inextricable, lobbying and PACs.
Yeah.
I guess a lobbyist would be like the individual human equivalent of a PAC. Like, why don't you tell us what a lobbyist does just day to day?
For sure. So, lobbying is like a job that you can have. Like you can be like a teacher, or you can be a salesman, or you can be like a lobbyist.
Yes, every 5-year-old's dream.
To be a lobbyist?
To be a lobbyist. To
Really?
work on Capitol Hill, to cozy up with all those politician sleaze bags, fly them around on your private jets. Who wouldn't want to do that,
Oh, let's not. Come on, we don't have to be that hard on lobbyists now, do we?
I don't think I was hard. You know how I feel about this. I get pretty heated about lobbyists. But there's good lobbying too. There's good lobbying done. Like the ACLU, they're a lobbying group, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We should just like be objective and talk about the purpose of lobbyists, I guess. And essentially, like you said, it's just like any other job. And you're hired by a special interest group, which is basically a fancy way of saying any type of organization or company or union or political group, anything like that. They'll hire you and they'll have specific interests. For example, the NRA, National Rifle Association, has specific interests, and they'll hire lobbyists that will basically sell these interests to politicians. Not literally. Just
pretty close to literally, though.
Pretty close to literally, yeah.
There's so the largest corporations or organizations that do lobbying are the National Association of Realtors, Blue Cross Blue Shield, American Hospital Association, and the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. So what are these organizations trying to achieve out of lobbying? Basically, they're hiring these lobbyists, and these lobbyists are going and developing relationships with congressmen, and basically what their ultimate, at the end of the day, objective is was I able to get these congressmen to get legislation on the floor and get legislation passed that favors my organization or corporation? So National Association of Realtors, they'd be looking for legislation to get passed that would help them in the real estate industry. One of the most influential industries in America that lobbies is the pharmaceutical industry. So if you look at the price that medicine is sold for in the United States compared to the price that the same medicine is sold for in other countries, you're going to see that in the US, there's a huge profit margin placed on the pricing. And the reason that they're able to do these huge profit margins is because they know that, people are willing to pay any amount for medicine.
They'll pay whatever they need to, right?
Yeah. And they completely exploit this fact, and pharmaceutical companies hire lobbyists, send them to Congress, and get them to pass legislation that allows them to have these insane profit margins and rip off people who are in dire need of medication.
Yeah, it's one of, for me, this isn't even a left, right, or middle thing. The way that big pharma uses lobbying to get what it wants and to completely turn healthcare into this capitalistic, really hegemonic thing it's pretty just universally disgusting, I think. And the way that these lobbyists work is also, it's almost shocking when you realize that the way that policy is written and that legislation is introduced onto the floor via lobbyists, it's a lot about who can you schmooze up to, who can you cozy up to and become friends with and turn into a familiar face, make some jokes, have some banter, grab coffee. These are the ways that policy is actually introduced, which is kind of mind-blowing to me, because you would think that in a society, if you want some just laws, then what you're going to do is have a completely objective group of people analyzing all the problems that exist. This sounds like pretty structural and big, but just bear with me. So people should be like analyzing what are society's problems and how can we solve them. Rather, these interest groups are sending literal cronies to Capitol Hill to become friends with politicians, to take them out to fancy dinners, fancy lunches, invite them out on their private jets to their private villas in Key West, in the Caribbean, stuff like that. And, become all buddy up with them, and sometimes make promises, sometimes say things like, if you move this policy forward, we'll create a super PAC on your behalf. Quid pro quo, tit for tat, stuff like that. That rhymed. But, that's the way that a lot of really major things are done. And especially in pharma. Mm-hmm. Lobbying has turned pharma into a completely profit-driven field. Almost like when you think of pharma, you want it to be like, okay, that's healthcare. Not really. It's more like banking or finance in my head when I think of pharma now, because of the way that lobbying has just changed it.
Yeah, and there's that story that about Abramoff and McCain and that whole episode. Why don't you say a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So that's a great example of the way lobbying works on Capitol Hill. So there was this guy Abramoff, and he was hired to represent the interests of this tribe of Native Americans in I think it was Missouri Valley, that whole region. But this was a pretty successful group of Native American people, and they were big in the casino business. So they hired Abramoff as a lobbyist to go against this bill that would tax casinos, essentially. And Abramoff, I think in the period of 2-3 years that he was in consultation with these peoples, I think he was paid over close to $50 million. So there's a lot of money in it for the lobbyists also. But like I was saying, like, he successfully was able to have that bill defeated through all sorts of lobbying. And then the most ironic thing about all of this is that the way the story ends really shows you that a lot of lobbyists are in this simply to exchange as an exchange of services, simply to capitalize on opportunities. So the people that were going against Abramoff, for example, McCain's campaign team, who were proponents of this casino tax levy, they investigated him, did all sorts of lobbying themselves, and it was revealed that in some emails, Abramoff said all sorts of really terrible things about his Native American clients, calling them like morons, monkeys, really derogatory, terrible stuff like that. And that just shows you that, I mean, they don't care about their clients. They don't really do this because they care about people. They do it because there's a $50 or $50 million check in it for them,
So not only do organizations try to represent themselves in government through lobbying or through PACs, there's also certain very wealthy individuals who make contributions of very, very large amounts, like George Soros, Tom Steyer, Jeff Bezos, Richard and Elizabeth. Who is this? You.
Some really rich people.
Yeah.
Some really rich people. And clearly they're not interested in being famous, because what the heck does that even say? I don't know. I've never seen that name, but these people are super powerful, and that's the point.
Yeah.
And they're okay with being hidden and unseen, because, if you were secretly the one who's calling all the shots through this like whole mastermind type thing, why would you want people to know who you are, I guess everyone knows Jeff Bezos, obviously. But in general, these are all like very wealthy individuals who are in some ways kind of running the show from backstage.
Another huge player in campaign financing is the union sponsorships. So labor unions can have a huge influence on which way an election goes depending on which way they tend to throw their money.
Yeah, those are really big. What comes to mind are like teachers unions, coal miners, like workers associations, stuff like that. Those have all played huge roles in elections. And there's this. Well, so we should just define a union, I guess, and it's what it sounds like, and it's pretty common. It's just a coalition of people who band together through a mutual interest. Typically, what comes to mind are labor unions, where people are interested because of their shared profession. Already talked about teachers. There's like auto unions, all sorts of stuff like that. But what comes to mind is this new Netflix movie. It had Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci. You remember this one? It's really new. The Irishman.
Oh,
so that's actually that's about unions.
That's fantastic. That's by that acclaimed director
Scorsese. Yeah,
Scorsese.
That little guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful movie, but it's just so long.
It's so long.
I remember there was this one scene where it's literally like Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro, and Joe Pesci just asking Robert De Niro if he slept well.
Joe Pesci.
He's like, "You want some cereal?" And Robert De Niro's like, "The cereal's good."
Yeah, like
they spent 10 minutes on a scene like that.
Yeah, and it feels like
if you can watch that for 10 minutes,
you can watch us.
You can watch us. I'm so happy you guys are still with us at this point. So
we made it, Mom.
Hit the like button.
Like and subscribe button to be complete.
Yeah.
I swear that movie is like watching a still life or something. Yeah. But anyway, labor unions, they're highly influential, especially the bosses who have collectivized the interest of all the members. They're lobbyists. They have all sorts of friends, take them out to dinner, who are in Congress, all sorts of stuff like that. Same thing as professional lobbyists. So definitely also super influential.
Mm-hmm. So once you kind of compile all this information together, today's episode has kind of maybe left you feeling very powerless in the sense that, oh, wow, like I'm so minuscule in the grand scheme of things.
A cog in the machine, as they say.
But, like ultimately when it comes down to it, like about all these things, but you want to actively, the reason that we tell you these things and the reason we want you to know about them is because we don't want you to remain blind and just kind of go along with this game that they're playing. Once you become aware of these things, you can actually actively look out and see like, oh, okay, this union is sponsoring this candidate for these reasons. And this doesn't only happen on the federal level. These things happen on local level as well.
I mean, we're offering you the red pill. That's basically what we're doing here. Or was it the blue pill? I haven't seen The Matrix. I think it's the red pill. We're giving them the red pill. This is your wake-up call. Wake up, sheeple. That was a little aggressive, but point being.
But once you get to know about these things, look out for them, and then when you're participating in elections, just be aware of them and try to support those candidates who say that they align with your interests most, because it could be even the fact that maybe some big union is sponsoring the candidate that you feel represents you the best.
Right.
But you have to watch out and make sure they're not tricking you by saying things you want to hear, but then in the back end kind of like looking out for these people who are funding them more.
Exactly.
Which can happen very often.
It happens. It's so easy. You turn on the TV and you'll watch a debate or you'll see a commercial, and these politicians will say all sorts of, they can say whatever they want essentially and get off scot-free. So just make sure that the people who you're watching on TV, make sure that their words align with the decisions they make in terms of the lobbyists that they'll hear, because this is public information in many cases. So do your due diligence, do your research on who are these politicians talking to, what interests do they represent, because that's effectively who you're putting into power. You're not putting into power the sound bites that you hear on CNN or Fox News or whatever. You're putting into power the friends of the people you're voting for. That's kind of the way that system's been set up.
Oh yeah, definitely. And when you see that these unions, these corporations, and these huge organizations are putting so much money into campaigning, that should tell you that, these people definitely have a very, very large effect on everything around you.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there, you can also look out for, there's a lot of grassroots candidates emerging who are kind of saying that I'm not going to take money from unions, I'm not going to take money from corporations, I'm not taking money from PACs. And their campaigns are largely like grassroots funded by just average individuals. And it's definitely very hard for them to keep up in like the campaigns.
It's impossible. It's almost impossible,
Yeah, exactly. Because, how are you going to do it? But the thing is that more often than not, since their campaign contributions are mainly coming from individuals who are representing a larger proportion of like the population in terms of like class, and they have interests of more people oftentimes better represented. Not always, but oftentimes. So it's always good to be on the lookout and support candidates this way. And this way, you could maybe even get a few more candidates running who would be better reflective of what you're looking for. Right.
And I guess we'll close with going back to the one of the first things we talked about feeling disempowered, knowing all of this information. So the thing about that is that the idea of feeling disempowered comes from the fact that we are all just people. It's just me. When you read all this information and understand the way that the system works, you think to yourself, I'm just me. What can I do? And which is kind of true. Like, what can one person do? But the moral of the story, and one of the things we want our viewers to take away from this is, don't let the conversation stop here. Go home, talk to your friends, talk to your parents, and make this something not at the back of your head that you can just forget about, but bring it to the forefront. Talk about this stuff with people who are interested and raise awareness, because there's power in numbers. And the more people who are on the wave and are educated voters, educated, informed citizens, the more powerful we'll be as a country that values democracy.
Definitely, yeah. I agree with that so much. And one other thing is that we're definitely not trying to say that unions, corporations, these organizations don't have a place in politics. Of course they do, because they're part of the nation. They have a very significant place. But, it's very important to think about whether the proportion of influence they have is equivalent to the proportion of influence they should have given the political sphere in total.
Exactly.
So on that note, I think that's a good place to conclude for today. And thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it. And we hope to have you back for the next episode.